In Search of the Miraculous by P.D. Ouspensky. Chapter 4. The teaching of the three forces is at the root of all ancient systems. The first force may be called active or positive, the second passive or negative, the third neutralizing. But these are merely names, for in reality all three forces are equally active and appear as active, passive, and neutralizing only at their meeting points, that is to say, only in relation to one another at any given moment. The first two forces are more or less comprehensible to man, and the third may sometimes be discovered either at the point of application of the forces, or in the medium, or in the result. But, speaking in general, the third force is not easily accessible to direct observation and understanding. The reason for this is to be found in the functional limitations of man's ordinary psychological activity and in the fundamental categories of our perception of the phenomenal world, that is, in our sensation of space and time resulting from these limitations. People cannot perceive and observe the third force directly any more than they can spatially perceive the fourth dimension. But by studying himself, the manifestation of his thought, consciousness, activity, his habits, his desires, and so on, man may learn to observe and see in himself the action of the three forces. Let us suppose, for instance, that a man wants to work on himself in order to change certain of his characteristics, to attain a higher level of being. His desire, his initiative, is the active force. The inertia of all his habitual psychological life, which shows opposition to his initiative, will be the passive or the negative force. The two forces will either counterbalance one another, or one will completely conquer the other, but at the same time, it will become too weak for any further action. Thus, the two forces will, as it were, revolve one around the other, one absorbing the other and producing no result whatsoever. This may continue for a lifetime. A man may feel desire and initiative, but all this initiative may be absorbed in overcoming the habitual inertia of life, leaving nothing for the purpose towards which the initiative ought to be directed. And so it may go on until the third force makes its appearance in the form of, for instance, a new knowledge, showing at once the advantage or the necessity of work on oneself, and in this way supporting and strengthening the initiative. Then the initiative, with the support of this third force, may conquer inertia, and the man becomes active in the desired direction. Examples of the action of the three forces and the moments of entry of the third force may be discovered in all manifestations of our psychic life, in all phenomena of the life of human communities and of humanity as a whole, and in all the phenomena of nature around us. But at the beginning, it's enough to understand the general principle. Every phenomenon, of whatever magnitude it may be, is inevitably the manifestation of three forces. One or two forces cannot produce a phenomenon. And if we observe a stoppage in anything, or an endless hesitation at the same place, we can say that at the given time, the third force is lacking. In trying to understand this, it must be remembered at the same time that people cannot observe phenomena as manifestations of three forces because we cannot observe the objective world in our subjective states of consciousness. And in the subjectively observed phenomenal world, we see in phenomena only the manifestation of one or two forces. If we could see the manifestation of three forces in every action, we would then see the world as it is. Only, it must be here remembered that a phenomenon which appears to be simple may actually be very complicated. That is, It may be a very complex combination of trinities, but we know that we cannot observe the world as it is, and this should help us to understand why we cannot see the third force. The third force is a property of the real world. The subjective or phenomenal world of our observation is only relatively real. At any rate, it is not complete. Returning to the world in which we live, we may now say that in the absolute, as well as in everything else, three forces are active: the active, the passive, and the neutralizing. But since by its very nature everything in the absolute constitutes one whole, the three forces also constitute one whole. Moreover, in forming one independent whole, the three forces possess a full and independent will, full consciousness, full understanding of themselves and of everything they do. The idea of the unity of these three forces in the absolute forms the basis of many ancient teachings. Consubstantial and indivisible Trinity, Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, and Siva, and so on. The three forces of the absolute constituting one whole, separate and unite by their own will and by their decision. At the points of junction, they create phenomena or worlds. Let me read that sentence again. The three forces of the absolute constituting one whole separate and unite by their own will and by their own decision. At the points of junction, they create phenomena or worlds. These worlds, created by the will of the absolute, depend entirely upon this will in everything that concerns their own existence. In each of these worlds, the three forces again act. Since, however, each of these worlds is now not the whole, but only a part, then the three forces in them do not form a single whole. It is now a case of three wills, three consciousnesses, three unities. Each of the three forces contains within it the possibility of all three forces, but at the meeting point of the three forces, each of them manifests only one principle: the active, the passive, or the neutralizing. The three forces together form a trinity, which produces new phenomena. But this trinity is different. It is not that which was in the absolute, where the three forces formed an indivisible whole and possessed one single will and one single consciousness. In the worlds of the second order, the three forces are now divided, and their meeting points are now of a different nature. In the absolute, the moment and the point of their meeting is determined by their single will. In the worlds of the second order, where there is no longer a single will, but three wills, the points of issue are each determined by a separate will, independent of others, and therefore the meeting point becomes accidental and mechanical. The will of the absolute creates the worlds of the second order and governs them, but it does not govern their creative work, in which a mechanical element makes its appearance. Let us imagine the absolute as a circle, and in it a number of other circles, worlds of the second order. Let us take one of these circles. The absolute is designated by the number 1 because the three forces constitute the whole of the absolute, and the small circle will designate by the number 3 because the world of the second order, the three forces are already divided. The three divided forces of the world of the second order, meeting together in each of these worlds, create new worlds of the third order. Let us take one of these worlds. The worlds of the third order created by the three forces which act semi-mechanically no longer depend upon the single will of the Absolute, but upon three mechanical laws. These worlds are created by three forces, and having been created, they manifest three new forces of their own. Thus, the number of forces acting in the worlds of the third order will be 6. In the diagram, the circle of the third order is designated by the number 6, 3 plus 3. In these worlds are created worlds of a new order, the fourth order, and in the worlds of the fourth order there act 3 forces of the world of the second order, 6 forces of the world of the third order, and 3 of their own, 12 forces altogether. Let us take one of these worlds and designate it by the number 12, 3 plus 6 plus 3. Being subject to a greater number of laws, these worlds still stand further away from the single will of the Absolute and are still more mechanical. The worlds created within these worlds will be governed by 24 forces, 3 plus 6 plus 12 plus 3. The worlds created within these worlds will be governed by 48 forces, the number 48 being made up as follows: 3 forces of the world immediately following the Absolute, 6 of the next one, 12 of the next, 24 of the one after that, 3 of its own, 3 plus 6 plus 12 plus 24 plus 3, 48 in all. Worlds created within worlds, 48 will be governed by 96 forces, 3 plus 6 plus 12 plus 24 plus 48 plus 3. The worlds of the next order, if there are any, will be governed by 192 forces, and so on. If we take one of the many worlds created in the Absolute, that is, World 3, it will be the world representing the total number of starry worlds, similar to our Milky Way. If we take World 6, it will be the world created within this world, namely the accumulation of stars, which we call the Milky Way. World 12 will be one of the suns that compose the Milky Way. Our sun. World 24 will be the planetary world, that is to say, all the planets of the solar system. World 48 will be the Earth. World 96 will be the Moon. If the Moon had a satellite, it would be World 192, and so on. The chain of worlds and the links of which are the Absolute, all worlds, all suns, our sun, the planets, the Earth, the Moon, forms the ray of creation in which we find ourselves. The ray of creation is for us the world in the widest sense of the term. Of course, the ray of creation does not include the world in the full sense of the term, since the Absolute gives birth to a number, perhaps to an infinite number of different worlds, each of which begins a new and separate ray of creation. Furthermore, each of these worlds contains a number of worlds representing a further breaking up of the ray again and again. Of these worlds, we select only one, our Milky Way. The Milky Way consists of a number of suns, but of this number, we select one sun which is nearest to us, upon which we immediately depend, and in which we live and move and have our being. Each of the other suns means a new breaking up of the ray, but we cannot study these rays in the same way as our ray, that is, the ray in which we are situated. Further, within the solar system, the planetary world is nearer to us than the sun itself, and within the planetary world, the nearest of all to us is the Earth, the planet upon which we live. We have no need to study other planets in the same way as we study the Earth. It is sufficient for us to take them all together, that is to say, on a considerably smaller scale than we take the Earth. The number of forces in each world, 1, 3, 6, 12, and so on, indicates the number of laws to which the given world is subject. The fewer laws there are in a given world, the nearer it is to the will of the Absolute. the more laws there are, the more laws there are in a given world, the greater mechanicalness, the further it is from the will of the Absolute. We live in a world subject to 48 orders of laws, that is to say, very far from the will of the Absolute, and in a very remote and dark corner of the universe. In this way, the ray of creation helps us to determine and to realize our place in the world. But, as you see, we have not yet come to questions about influences. In order to understand the difference between the influences of various worlds, we must better understand the law of three, and then further still another fundamental law, the law of seven, or the law of octaves. And this concludes chapter 4. And I don't know about you, but I found that really confusing, and I have no idea what he was trying to say there. So I hope chapter 5 is going to be more straightforward and more interesting, because this last part didn't end so well. I do remember, though, reading The Fourth Way, and there was a chapter in there that was about the law of creation, the ray of creation, and the law of three, and the law of seven. And so I'll put a link to that at the end here, and maybe if we listen to that, maybe that'll make sense and bring it all together. I hope so, because this is mind-boggling. I don't know where he's going with this. If you have any thoughts on this, leave them below, and till soon.